this is my review on Jurassic World Dominion and Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Season 5. This is completely non-scripted. This is my own personal thoughts, and I just want to basically just talk about my own feelings and my personal opinions about the show and about the movie that I recently watched. I didn't get to watch Jurassic World Dominion when it initially came out because, well, I didn't have the money at the time. My family did not have the money to buy tickets and see it then. We saw it this week on, I think, Tuesday or Monday. I don't particularly know or remember. And I binge watched season 5 in Sketnova, the Carnotaurus' Discord, and I want to basically give my own personal thoughts and opinions on both the show and the movie at the same time, practically just killing two birds with one stone. So let's start off with Dominion. I think Dominion was good. It could have been better. Yes, Dominion has its problems, but in my personal opinion, Dominion is quite entertaining and actually is quite interesting as a story. I think necessarily it has a lot of editing issues because events in that movie just go by so fast. They're fun and entertaining to watch, but it just goes by so fast. Also, we don't really get to see a lot of dinosaurs interacting with the human side of the world. We don't get to see them enough implemented in our the daily life of the humans in the movie. Necessarily what we are shown, we're shown that, but it's very minimal. And necessarily the black market scene and everything of how people are illegally farming dinosaurs or harvesting them, or simply using them in pit fighting the Baryonyx and Carnotaurus and the Lystrosaurus and all that. It's honestly quite interesting. It's also interesting to see new species of dinosaur. My favorite was Morus intrepidus because of it gives this vibe of being a small, vicious but cute little thing. And in the movie, at the end of the movie, we actually see it at Washington D.C. A little girl is actually petting it, feeding it. It's honestly really cute. And honestly, on the side of the dinosaurs, I think the dinosaurs were really good. Necessarily in the scenes that they were in. For example, the Atrociraptor chase scene, it was really good. Seeing the Allosaurus and Carnotaurus necessarily work together and necessarily kill the guy on the scooter, that was really cool as well. Therizinosaurus was done really well, I think almost excellently, because necessarily when looking at almost prior to the 2000s, dinosaur herbivorous dinosaurs Hadrosaurus and Ceratopsians and sauropods are always depicted as being these gentle giants that wouldn't hurt a fly. But necessarily in newer depictions of dinosaurs in art and documentaries and movies, we're seeing dinosaurs be more herbivorous dinosaurs Ceratopsians and Chylosaurids and Therizinosaurus being more aggressive. And actually it's depicted of that Therizinosaurus is depicted as being a very aggressive animal, and that's really a nice touch that we saw in the movie. And also, the Giganotosaurus versus T-Rex fight was also, it was too short. Honestly, I don't like the way how the Giga was killed because it was just very boring and bland, and it was just meh, honestly. But in my opinion, I think I would rank Dominion at a 8.5 or around a 7 out of 10 because it was entertaining, but necessarily I do see the issues when it comes to editing and a lot of things. Also, before I go on to review season 5 of Camp Cretaceous, I want to talk about the human characters and their interactions. Necessarily the plot twist between the plot twist that Maisie is not an actual clone of of her mother, but actually she is basically some conception of God, necessarily, because if you were to compare how Maisie was created, it's basically basically God creating Eve for Adam by basically taking a portion of his rib, and it's practically what you think it is. Also, like moving on to Biosyn. Biosyn is like almost like it's done like mediocrely. Like we don't see them doing a lot of evil stuff, but necessarily them creating the locust to like basically take control of like the world. And necessarily, it's honestly what something Biosyn would do, because Biosyn has been depicted as like doing stuff like very shady stuff. Like for example, manufacturing diseases in the novels. Dotson had basically created this form of rabies and had implemented it on a population of people, and necessarily that's what necessarily Biosyn would do in the movie. That's what Biosyn does in the movie universe, where basically they just create a bunch of prehistoric locusts that like decimate crops and stuff, so they can basically control the world's food and like all that other stuff. And necessarily seeing Henry Wu's character, seeing him being more forgiving and being more like, necessarily like regretting all like his mistakes and like trying to fix what he did wrong. Honestly, that's a kind of like a really interesting character, but necessarily it's not what like you like see. Like you won't like necessarily what you read in like the novels. Like Henry Wu is like very like sporadic, like not sporadic, but necessarily he's very like, he holds himself to a higher standard, but necessarily he's not selfish. He necessarily in the novels he acts selfless and like the like all the way up to it, like not all the way up to his death, but like during his like scene where he gets mauled by the velociraptors, he necessarily acts in like a sort of kindness and sort of way, and necessarily like he tries to save Ellie, and like the raptors like rip him out of the doorway and like they eat him. Necessarily seeing this version of Dr. Wu was kind of interesting and sort of entertaining to see him try to fix his mistakes and like try to reprimand himself. And Ellie Sattler, Ian Malcolm, and Alan Grant were done really well. Their characters were quite interesting. Seeing Alan Alan and Ellie finally become a couple, that was honestly really like heartwarming and sweet. And seeing Malcolm do all his science and being very basically something like rich billionaire meets basically science mathematician, to where how he basically confronts Dotson and basically talks almost quite literally talks down to him in a sort of manner. And also seeing Dotson basically try to kill Alan Grant, kill Alan and Ellie and Maisie was honestly something that he actually does in books. In The Lost World, he tries to kill Sarah Harding, but it doesn't work. And so necessarily that's another character, because many people would technically gloss over this, but when you look at it at more deeper than that, Dotson's character was actually quite done well. He's more he's more kind and very he's very kind and very sophisticated as a character on the surface, but when you already know that he's gonna be doing some shady shit. And so honestly, in my opinion, Dominion was really good. It has its problems. Necessarily, everyone says it is either boring or it's bad at it's very bad in general. Honestly, I don't think Dominion was actually that bad in general. It's just editing issues and a lot of stuff that we did not get to see, because we're actually getting a director's cut and it's gonna add additional 17 minutes to the movie. So wonder what that's gonna look like and whether that's gonna change my review of the movie, but So moving on to Camp Cretaceous Season 5. Season 5 was good as well. It jumped Season 4 jumped the shark necessarily, but Season 5 basically even jumps the shark even more. It necessarily it's practically Scan Command. If you're a kid from if you were a kid from the early 2000s or around the late 90s, you already know what Scan Command is. And so it was it's very cartoonish in the way how they're just trying to control the dinosaurs for entertainment and stuff like that. And it's honestly very it's very kid friendly in a way. It doesn't take itself too seriously because Season 4 kind of really jumped the shark. But also necessarily as Season 5 was good, but it could have been better. But like honestly, like you hate to love it, but you love to hate it. So it's like one of those seasons where it ties up all loose ends. Necessarily like for anyone who's wondering about Chaos and Limbo, Chaos is possibly either the one that got captured and got transported in Fallen Kingdom, or is the one that died in the lava chamber. Limbo is possibly dead due to the fact that she gets literally manhandled and like literally chucked like across the fucking screen in by Big Edie. And in fact, there was I bet you like a bunch of Rex fans were like cheering that like the two Rexes won against basically how the two Rexes won against the Spinos, because necessarily like I bet you everyone was like, wow, they did it again, because in the season in like the last few episodes, the Spino actually kills and well, not kills, but rather like it's a fake out kill. Kills Big Edie, and necessarily like me when we were all watching it was like they did it again, but actually it was a fake out, and it was actually quite interesting to see them do that. Necessarily like the show ties up all loose ends really, and necessarily it like there's a lot of deaths too, a lot of brutal deaths. Like we also get to see like the compies like with their narcoleptic venom, and necessarily them like killing another person, like the bald woman who was like trying to basically who was working for Biosyn but like stole the Dotson's bag. And necessarily we're also like seeing like a lot of creatures, like yes, like some creatures like they some like are newly introduced, like the Nothrosaurus, which is an interesting animal altogether. And seeing it kill the Dilo was honestly like hilarious, because like someone was I forget his name, but like he was like basically like screaming out like welcome to the Thunderdome and like some stuff like that. It was honestly hilarious. And the show also like this season also like basically wraps up everyone's story arcs. Kenji, like it's also very nice to see Kenji get adopted by Darius, and also seeing basically like Ben stay back on the island to take care of all the animals alongside Dr. and May, and necessarily seeing Yaz and Sammy be a couple, and Brooklyn and Kenji like be a couple as well. It's honestly, it really like wraps up all storylines and everything, kills off like villains. It also like Kenji's dad is like a very like he's a very like shit character. Not like in like his like the way he works with all the other characters, but he's very shitty and like very like evil. He doesn't really give a shit like about like the kids. He's willing to even kill them to some degree and just tie up loose ends. And honestly, it's very like when you think about it, it's really fucked up for him to do that, even to his son's friends, like Kenji's friends. Even though like Kenji's his son, he's willing to leave him on an island that's about to explode, because hilariously enough, during the season they tried to rescue all the dinosaurs and like destroy all their chips and like destroy all the Brads. And necessarily they have to like hack into the mainframe system, and they change the password. So basically he gives them Kenji gives this fake password that sets off this system that allows it to like make this fake doomsday event that the island's about to explode. And basically Kenji's dad basically literally leaves him on the island, and that's very selfish and like very like dark and like decrepit about like Kenji's dad, that he's willing to leave his son on an exploding island that wasn't going to explode to begin with, just to save his own skin. And honestly, it makes Kenji's dad more of a like selfish selfish and very evil character. Not like around Dotson, because actually he's technically practically Camp Cretaceous version of Dotson, even though we got to see Dotson. And also how Dotson got that can. We are shown how Dotson got the can, and honestly was like, it basically ties into Dominion. I'm like, how the hell did you get the can? Well, it's shown in the show. And necessarily like also like seeing the Hadrosaurs defend themselves against the Parasaurs defend one of their own by basically hiding it under leaves. That was honestly actually an interesting thing. Also, like seeing like, you know, all the dinosaurs at the end of the show like fight each other like literally like something out of Dinosaur King or Skank Man. It was honestly like, that was actually fun to watch. It like season 5 like already like jumps the shark, but necessarily like it's one of those shows that really like, you know, it's one of those shows that it's a season that necessarily ties up loose ends. It like further jumps the shark and makes things a little bit more ridiculous, but you kind of can't not like it because it's actually kind of interesting and enjoyable to some degree, and that's what I like about it. Even though like I watched a few clips of season 4. Season 4, in my opinion, was a little bit more ridiculous, but like in like a sort of sense. And necessarily watching season 3 and comparing like season 5 to all the other seasons, season 3 is like one of my favorite seasons, including around season 2. Season 1 is like, if I was to put all these seasons in a tier list, S tier would be necessarily season 3 and season 2. A tier would be season 1, and season 4 would be C tier, and season 5 would be around C tier as well, sharing that with season 4. And honestly, in my opinion, Camp Cretaceous season 5 is really good. It jumped the shark even further than season 4. And honestly, in my opinion, ranking it would be season 5 would be like basically a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Even though I enjoyed it, it has its issues, and the fact that it's tied in with the Jurassic universe is kind of ridiculous in a sense. But necessarily it ties up like, you know, why the Spino, why we did not see the Spino in Jurassic World Dominion. And honestly, I really hate how people like, oh, we didn't get to see the Spino. And it's like, oh boy, just so like, But yeah, those are my reviews on Camp Cretaceous Season 5 and Jurassic World Dominion, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.